Okay, this is the second video of our second week in the study of Church History 1, Early and Medieval Church History. I want to talk to you for just a few moments about a very important and moving aspect of our heritage as Christians, and it is the persecutions of the early church and the martyrdoms that took place as a result of that. This is, of course, tremendously inspiring, moving aspect of our history. And so what took place? During the first 3 centuries of the church, it's well known, the Colosseum, the lions, the beasts, the burning at the stake, things of that sort that took place in church history. So let's look at a little bit of history here and why and what took place. The false accusations that came against Christians in the early church were because of a complete misunderstanding that the Roman government had toward what was Christianity. And we can talk more about that. The apologists, whether it be Tertullian or Justin Martyr, dealt with the reasons why Christianity did what it does what it does, and so forth. But nonetheless, there rose up within the Roman system a fear, hatred, misunderstanding, dislike of the Christians, and therefore the persecutions took place. But let's back up first. The first Christian martyr was, of course, Stephen in the book of Acts. He was not martyred by the Romans, he was martyred by the Jews. The first Roman opposition took place in the 60s AD by Nero Caesar. And most are in some way familiar with Nero. Nero was, by all indications, probably some sort of madman. It was under him that Peter and Paul were martyred in Rome. As the story has it, Rome was a mess, just physically a mess. There was squalor, there was poverty, there were areas of the city that were not in good shape, and some historians say that Nero wanted to rebuild Rome, and so therefore he started a fire. And he started that fire to burn down portions of Rome, and started it in the Jewish quarter, the Jewish/Christian quarter of Rome. And when the public outcry came out, why has this happened? And there were accusations that perhaps Nero himself had lit the fire, that he said, no, it wasn't me, it was those Christians, those crazy Christians, those Christians who have secret meetings. And he rose up and started a persecution that was severe, taking Christians, sewing them up in animal skins and releasing dogs upon them. As tradition has it, he took Christians, tied them to the posts in his garden, lit them afire, and lit his garden by the burning of Christians. Nero Caesar. And it was a truly bad era of time, but that was the first persecution against Christians. Now, that was really done by a madman. He had no rhyme or reason about him. So the Caesars that followed, the ones that were the major persecutors of the church, had followed much more of a system. And so let me outline that for you. And I might also add that there were not all bad Caesars. The persecutions came somewhat like a pulsation or like spasms. There would be an intense time led off by perhaps decades in which there was peace, and then would come an incredibly difficult, hard time again. After Nero, it was another 20 years or so before Domitian rose up. And Domitian, the only reason why Domitian Caesar is said to have persecuted the church is it was written of him that he executed a cousin by the name of Domitian, Flavia Domitian, and he executed that cousin for a charge of atheism. That's really the only thing we know. It was Flavia Domitilla. That's the name of the individual that was executed for atheism. And once again, you may or may not have read yet about the accusations. Whenever they accused Christians of atheism, they weren't saying they didn't believe in God. They didn't believe in gods, plural. They didn't believe in the gods. And when they didn't believe in the gods, they believed in something you could not see. There were no images. There were no idols. There were no outward manifestations. And so they were called atheists. Domitian launched that persecution. The next would come relatively quickly, Trajan. And here's what Trajan did. Trajan said that Christianity was illegal, but he said it's not such a big problem that we're going to chase them. So it was a don't ask, don't tell policy under Trajan that said the only reason why we will persecute or kill or execute Christians is if they are asked, and if they say, I'm a Christian, if they expose the fact that they are a Christian, then we will kill them, or we will persecute them, or we will imprison them. But if they don't say anything, we're not going to worry about it. We're going to let it go. Moving forward, Marcus Aurelius was against Christianity because of what he called its obstinacy. The next major move in persecution happened under Decius, and that would have been in the beginning of the 3rd century in Decius. And he enacted a form of persecution that required that once a year every Roman citizen must come to, like, the city center, to the courthouse, and there pledge allegiance and say Caesar is Lord. And if they did that, they would be given a certificate. And that certificate was called a libellum, and that would verify that for 1 year they were a good citizen. Now, they could go back and worship whatever gods they wanted to the rest of the time, but for that one moment, they were to pledge allegiance. And not just a sense of political loyalty or good citizenship, but worship. And for this, the Christians, of course, would not do that, and he launched a horrific persecution against anyone who did not prove loyal to him. And that leads us then, the persecutions tailed off after that, but it was always there. And under Valerian and Diocletian, which leads to 315, and Constantine I, and he did not persecute the Christians, but in fact himself supposedly, and we believe, converted. And that, of course, ended the era of persecution, Christianity. Many of the early church fathers suffered persecution and martyrdom. Clement of Rome was tied to the anchor of a ship and thrown into the sea. One of the most interesting, I think, is Ignatius of Antioch. He was one of the earliest, 107 AD. He had supposedly seen Jesus when he was a boy growing up in Palestine. Was just a young boy when Jesus lived. But he rose up to be the bishop of Antioch in the early part of the 2nd century and was convicted of being a Christian. And what the Romans did was obviously a rather stupid thing. They decided to take him to Rome for his martyrdom, and so they marched him across the Roman Empire. So he, escorted by a Roman cohort, walked to Rome. Everywhere he went, the church turned out and he preached to them. This was an incredible encouragement and inspiration to the church as they watched Ignatius of Antioch walk to Rome, and it was an incredible moment in the history of the church. When he got to Rome, he was interrogated, and they turned the wild beasts loose upon him. The last one I want to mention here is Polycarp. And you have in the notes that I've downloaded to you, as a matter of fact, in supplemental reading, I have the story of Polycarp of Smyrna, a disciple of the Apostle John, and at 87 years of age, he was hauled in before the proconsul and interrogated before what amounts to a coliseum, an entire arena of people. And the dialogue between him and the proconsul is very moving. He was told to deny Christ and swear allegiance to Caesar. And he said, essentially, 87 years I have served the Lord, and he's never done me wrong, and how can you ask me to turn against him now? He said, the proconsul said, I'll turn wild beasts against you. And he said, turn them loose. He said, I'll throw you to the fire. And he said, I'm not afraid of the fire. You should be afraid of eternal fire. One particular moment that's amusing, he said, simply say away with the atheist. The proconsul was talking about the atheists being the Christians. He said, simply say away with the atheists and you can live. And so Polycarp looked at that vast arena, thousands of people. He swept his arm and he said, away with the atheists. They burned him at the stake. They stabbed him. They turned wild beasts loose on him. We have the testimony of a great man of God who speaks to us of faith in the face of opposition and trial. There are others, Perpetua and Felicitas. Perpetua, young mother, Felicitas, pregnant. And how they composed themselves and sang while the beasts tore them apart. And the testimony of those who love not their lives to the death. They speak to us. And it's happening today in the Muslim world. It's happening in China. It's happening in portions of Asia that are opposed to Christianity. May we be so full of faith that we could do that too. God bless you.